Hello everybody, and a special welcome again to you who've been watching all my videos so far. In case if you're new and haven't seen any of my videos, well, I try to give you loads of hints and tips in all my videos of how to make your sewing easier. Now this particular project was actually already something if you've been doing a little bit of sewing already. But I do also have many videos which are really for starters. So if you like my way of showing things, then look around in my playlist Sewing Made Easy. But let's get to the point. So far I've showed you 6 videos of how to do your own jacket, Sakko, blazer, starting with doing the pattern all the way to the state you see it here. You find it in my info box exactly how to get to all of those videos which I've done about this jacket. So now there's actually only one more thing to do. We have to join the lining, which is finished, together with the main material. So you will see me doing on the machine how I stitch those two parts together on the front, over the collar, down again, and finishing it totally off. I know this is not the most easiest job, but believe me, if you follow step by step, take your time and don't hesitate if maybe one stitch didn't turn out as nice as you wanted it. It doesn't matter. You will get there with a little bit of patience and love for the work that you're doing. So let us finish together this jacket off, in case if you've been doing all the steps already together with me. Here we go.
So take your main material, have a look at your collar and on your lapel, and make a mark from the last stitch from where you were putting the collar in exactly a length 1 centimeter apart from the edge, if that is your seam allowance, and do exactly the same on the other side, and measure and make sure the marks you're putting on are on both sides exactly the same length for where you will be stitching along, to make sure when you finish the coat they both have exactly the same length. So now put your lining on the bottom on the machine and take your scissors right now, because we will have to cut in on the lapel, not on the collar, to where we used to have our mark there from the length where we stitched the collar in, and clip with your scissors exactly directly onto that last stitch that you have there. Don't cut the thread open, but really go all the way onto that last stitch. Then do exactly the same on the opposite side and clip in with your scissors onto the last stitch. Now take your main material and do exactly the same thing here on the collar, because we have not clipped this in with our scissors yet. Only on the lapel, not on the collar. Clip exactly onto your last stitch there with your scissors, and of course the same thing on the other side, directly onto that stitch. Now the lining is lying on the sewing machine facing the proper side upwards. Now take your main material, put it the right side down onto the lining, and go down the lapel to your hem part. Put edge on edge. If you cut it that way, that it will be exactly right down there as I showed you in all my videos, and start stitching upward on that front edge in the width how you added your seam allowance. On all this edge sewing, make sure you really have edge on edge lying evenly, and right away after you've done a couple of centimeters, look for the top where your lapel is and your collar is, to make sure you really can stitch upwards totally straight without putting any widths in any of the materials. It's got to really lay nice and flat and continue all the way up to the top. So far on that edge, that is just a straight seam that you're doing. But before you get to the top, stop about 10-15 centimeters before you get to the first corner from the lapel, and look now for your last stitch in that corner where you finished putting the color onto the neckline, because now you have to put exactly those last stitches on top of each other. Also, the seam from the color should be lying on top of each other. This is very important that you work very exact in that corner now. So in the moment you know you do have your last stitches from the color stitching in on top of each other, keep it holding with your left hand, as you can see here, and go to the corner from the lapel and stitch around the corner. And now again, make sure your seam and this last stitch from the lining color and from the main material color is exactly on top of each other, and then continue stitching on the line that you drew there directly into that corner, so you practically meet the other stitch. And when you open this up now, you can see they're exactly right. And make sure you fasten that last seam very well, that it doesn't open up again. So we continue on the color now. So I like to put my foot from the sewing machine on top of my material. It's holding my jacket in position, so I can work on this and look again for my last stitch here. Really put this well on top of each other. And in the moment I know that my seams are directly on top of each other, the color seams, and my last stitch is on top of each other, I again start exactly where I can see my last stitch from the color and go along my drawn line and now go around the corner. And I know I got 1 centimeter added on my color, so I go 1 centimeter along there as well. And now it's time for me to look where I have my marks for the back, for the middle of my color, because I want them to be exactly in line together. So I'm stitching just a little bit over my 2 marks that I just put on top of each other. And again now I'm looking right away to the end part where I got to join my colors and my last stitches together again. As this particular job with the corners is so important, take your time for this, really do that. Now look along that you got any pleaches that you would be stitching in. Nicely flat on top of each other, everything. Make sure you're putting those seams from the 2 parts really on top of each other, and stitch into the corner, around the corner, and then start right away looking again to get that last stitch from the 2 colors directly on top of each other, as you can see it here. And this other side of the corner I will show you another possibility of how to stitch the corner. As on the first corner I put that seam on the side, but now I show you can also, if you wish, have that seam from the color on both color parts towards the top and stitch them together. But you must make sure that the lapel part you fold down, because that's where you do not want to stitch over. So fold it down like that. Do the same on the main material, but leave the seam from the color folded over to the top towards the color, and now stitch exactly into that corner right there. And make sure you're stitching back and forward, because you do not want that last stitch to open up. And now take it out the machine out and check it. Have a look how well that fits together. All stitches are in one corner on top of each other. That means it's actually held so well in that corner already, all of it together, that all I have to do is again start exactly on that stitch I see there, the last or the first stitch, however you want to call it. And that's where I got to start stitching back and forward, because I do not want that corner to open up, and go along the line that I drew earlier on, so I have the same length of the lapel than on the other side. Now go around the corner evenly as you did on the other side, and now the most difficult stuff is done already, because now you got a straight seam to go down all the way to the bottom. Again, make sure you're not stitching any pleaches in anywhere, but just do your centimeter or whichever allowance you added for your seam and stitch all the way down straight to the bottom, all the way through. Then you should maybe briefly check your lapel and your collar on the top to make sure they have the same length. Turn it over from the right side, checking it. Then take it back like what I'm doing here and slightly cut down the corners to really turn it over completely and correct now to make sure you can really push the corners out evenly and nice, ready for ironing. Then take both sides when you've done that, hold them onto each other and check again if they're really exactly the same length. Otherwise, change it again, turn it to the left side and either take some out or stitch some more away. They got to be exactly even, as you can see right here how I'm holding it and showing it to you. And you can see how nicely the corners meet there, the last stitch in that corner, and that's how it's got to look like. Next thing I'm going to do after I checked all this, that I'm really satisfied with it, I will stitch over the collar and the lapel against the way it will be ironed, because that will make it much better for the collar to lie. And I will stitch on the under collar, which is the color which is added onto the main material. Therefore, I pull it under my machine while I have the lining lying on the right side and my main material lying on the left side. And now you will find right away that you're not able to start stitching all the way in the corner of the collar. But that is not necessary at all. So just start anywhere where how far you can get in with your machine or with your foot. The seam is lying now to the left side, which is the under collar, and that's exactly where you're stitching, like let's say 1 millimeter next to the seam that you have there. And on the other side again, you only stitch as far as you can get into this corner from that color. And that's absolutely enough, and you don't need to go any farther. That's all right. And as I mentioned, I also want to do the same more or less with the lapel. But here you can see already how nicely it rolls over then. I'm pulling my coat now just over to the left side from myself to get onto this lapel, which is from the top down from the collar now, and I put my seam now on the right side towards the main material, and I'm stitching again to wherever I can start, how I get in with the foot. I'm stitching the seam towards the right side to the main material, and I worked out earlier on approximately where my first button will be on the jacket. That also means where the lapel will be running around over. That means I got to start way ahead of that and join exactly again on the other side. That means I'm stopping here right now, as you can see. And now I push my seam to the left side towards the facing practically, although it is part of the lapel as well, as you know. And now I stitch my inner seam on the left side down underneath the part from the lining practically, because that is the side underneath where the main material rolls over, like you see here, while on the top the lapel is running over. And of course I have to do exactly the same on the other side, but that means I'm starting now on the bottom, and as my lining is now on the left side, I will stitch the seam underneath also towards the left side. And again, I have to think about it right away. Where will my buttons be? Because I want the main material to roll over towards the lining there. And now, where my buttons are finished towards the top there, now there I'm putting the seam to the right side, which means to the main material, so the lapel can nicely then roll over the main material. That is the idea about this stitching against what I'm showing you here. And at the end, again, I cannot stitch all the way into the corner from my lapel up there. I only stitch as far as I can get in with my foot, and I finish right there. Our next step now is to stitch the two color seams together. As you remember, some parts we ironed apart, like in the front of the color, while in the lining part it was ironed over to one side. But on the main material, the color, we ironed apart all the way along. So start in the back middle and put your marks from the middle, from the colors together. That's the middle of the back. And there in the lining, you also had your mark there from the middle. Put that together and now go forward over the shoulder and to the front where we just stitched into this little corner from the lapel. Now all seams that are ironed apart, you should leave apart and stitch them together, while on the back where we got the lining ironed down to one side, it's also got to stay that way. So go along that seam. Now hold your corner exactly flat on top of each other right there. I keep my hand inside to make sure it doesn't flip over. And now I'm putting those color seams exactly on top of each other, holding it. Then I can get my other hand out again. And I start sewing exactly in that corner while seam on seam is lying on top of it. Now important is to know you're not stitching on top of the seam that you see there now, but you're stitching along the edge of your material, which means you're maybe 3 or 4 millimeters inwards from the material edge. And you must look right away for the back middle, and you must look for the shoulders, because it's all got to lie flat, and there should be no widths anywhere stitched, because otherwise your whole color might be pulling sideways to one or the other side. So again, take your time, look which way were your seams ironed and keep them that way, and continue over the shoulder towards the middle in the back, and again look right away for the end now. Hold it together on the full length, continue a little bit with the sewing, straighten out your jacket, go inside, hold this color there together really flat, then grab on the other side, put the two seams on top of each other before you let go in the inside to make sure this is really lying really flat in that corner without any widths anywhere. And finish off by stitching now all the way to the end of that color seam, all the way along the edge. And when you got there, then definitely pull it over to the right side for yourself after you've checked the left side once as well, and really check that you didn't catch anything while stitching, and make sure this color is not twisting into any direction.
And now it's time to join the sleeves together. Therefore, put your jacket on the table, put the shoulders together from the lining and the main material, and put the sleeves straight on top of each other. Now you need to cut yourself a little piece of lining 1.5 centimeters wide, approximately 6-7 centimeters long. You will need that on the machine because we have to fasten the side seam from the lining and from the main material together. But if we would do this directly there on the seams, it could be a bit tight and pull, and therefore we will under machine then stitch that piece onto here and the other side onto there. That gives us a little bit of movement and is ideal to hold the lining up in the coat so it won't fall down underneath your hem. That will be the first thing we do. As soon as that is tightened up, you look down your sleeve. As I said before, put it all straight on top of each other. That's fastened already. Now look on your underarm seam from the lining and from the main material and put them on top of each other. What is very often done mistake on putting sleeves together that people like to turn them. Then you try to put your arm in it, but you can't get through because it's twisted inside. So if you do it this way, the way I'm showing you, this will not happen. So this is held, as I mentioned before. Take two of the same seams, because you can see this is one go. Otherwise, if it would be turned, you couldn't look at it correctly. So that is obvious that it's got to be like this. Go down this and then go inside with your hands in the main material and in the lining, and now put those two seams just easily like that together. And you can check again. They're lying as you will be stitching them together there now, and nothing is twisted and nothing is turned. And exactly that I will show to you now on the sewing machine. I wanted to show this to you first here on the table. The reason is, when I'm on the sewing machine, you like to have the camera close on what I'm doing, and then you wouldn't see this whole explanation which I've just told you all about, how to put it down. Alright, we continue. So we're on the sewing machine now, and you put your jacket down so you can see your side seam from the main material and from the lining. Now take this little piece of lining, which you just cut yourself, and put it directly under the side seam. Doesn't matter which one you start on first. Put it under the machine, and where you got your seam, right there, stitch it on like that on the seam part, not into the material. You got to be careful there. Now you take the opposite from your lining and put it on the side seam the same way you did there. So you have about 2 centimeters in between for moving, or an inch. It's approximately an inch. And again here, I'll take this, and you take this however you get best onto the seam, which is comfortable for you. It doesn't matter from which side you're stitching this on, as long as you put it on the right seam. So the only thing that's important is that you're not catching anything of your outer material, and that you have the space in between. The same we will do right away with another piece like that on the shoulder, because they're also got to be held together. So take your shoulder, put your little lining piece on top of the shoulder, and stitch it on the seam part onto that. Now take your opposite shoulder, put them on top of each other, and there you do have your shoulder pad. Look, where is your shoulder from the main material? Mine is right there. So in that position, again on the shoulder pad, but not all the way through this time. This is exactly here where my opposite from my shoulder, I'll stitch this piece onto here. Of course, in case if you didn't put a shoulder pad in your jacket, then you would stitch it on directly onto the seam here, which you've done on the lining as well. So I push this a little bit back because I don't want to go through all the way through my pad, and I fasten it with a couple of stitches there on the shoulder pad. So also here I have a certain width for some movement in the shoulder area. But now we get to the bottom of the sleeve. As I mentioned before, you have to really put this down totally flat. Then go inside your two sleeves, lining and main material, and turn them towards each other, so right side's lying on the right side. I repeat, you got it lying like that. Take this one in the inside and that one, and fold them towards each other, so you have your two seams lying here as a continuation. Now for the stitching, don't stitch on the lining, stitch on the main material. The lining has got to be on the bottom. Put exactly seam on top of seam, edge on edge from your cutting material, and right away do some straight stitching for quite a while. And already then you can put your main material inside here and check if that's all correctly fitting for you. And that looks very good for me at the moment. So I'm holding this onto each other here, edge on edge, as always, and I stitch all the way to where I get my vent coming up. And this vent now, I'm putting down flat, and here you see the envelope corner which we did on the sleeve, you remember if you watched all my videos. And I'm stitching a bit over this. Underneath I can already feel from my vent the under part, and I will only stitch so far until I feel through this coat, through this material here, where my under vent is starting. Up to there I can stitch this, and I can check here. You can see I stopped directly in front of this, right there. So now fold this lining over, open it up here, and continue exactly my seam practically opposite of there. So I put it under the machine. I know I've done a centimeter stitching, and that's why I again do a centimeter. Pushing my main material into the lining here, and I check that my width from my lining and my main material is exactly the same. And all I have to do now is go along the edge and finish where I just started my seam. Now you should check again, because now you can see it very well, if your arm is twisted or not. And mine looks very good. I think I'm satisfied with this. But before we turn the jacket inside out, now again we have to fasten the seam that we got left here from the arm, so the lining will not fall down when I'm wearing the jacket. So I put it exactly in my fold from the bottom of the sleeve, and I'm holding the fold with my hand here, so I can now take this seam, put it onto that, and put another stitch on there, and then that is held up as well. It's just there, but make sure not to stitch farther than your seam was in that position there. So what you do now, you go into your arm, grab it on the seam, pull it over, pull it around, and have a look at your sleeve. Looks perfect from that side, looks perfect there. And looking inside of my sleeve, I can see it's perfectly stitched exactly as I wanted this sleeve to be. So we can continue and finishing off by doing the seam on the bottom.
So put your jacket on the machine, lining on the bottom, main material on the top. Look at the fold where you ironed your hem over, and look where your front seam from the edge is coming down, because that's where we will start sewing right now. Fold the seam from the front edge over, because that's the way we stitched it down. As you maybe remember, we stitched it towards the lapel or the interfacing, and exactly in that corner fold it over so the seam is lying underneath, and look for the fold which you ironed over. If you don't see it, maybe make yourself a little line there with a pencil, and start to sew about 2 millimeters underneath the fold that you ironed into the hem here. So make a seam about 2 or 3 centimeters long where you started there, like I said, approximately 2 millimeters underneath your fold, and make sure everything is really lying flat down there on your machine. So do this straight seam for, like I said, approximately 3 centimeters underneath your fold line, and then right away sew a curve towards your bottom seam. Just go across like that there to get to your 1 centimeter width, which we are usually doing all our seams. Make sure to put both material edges even with each other, and look right away for your side seam, which you want to be absolutely in line with each other. And all the seams that you do have, you will either fold apart as you iron them, or if they've been ironed to one side, then leave them towards that side that you ironed them to. Now all you have to do is go all the way along your bottom seam. This was the middle of your back. You can see that's where we actually stitched a little dart in to get some width in the back in the coat. and you continue over that middle top all the way to the next seam, which again you want to be exactly in line with each other. With other words, you really stitch from seam to seam and keep them always all even with each other. Otherwise, something could be pulling, and that's not what you want. So we're getting towards the end. You see there the mark we originally put in the cutting the material in, as that is also the point where exactly our fold is. And now we have to do exactly the same what we did in the beginning. We have to go slightly sideways in a curve towards our fold again, and then to stitch another 2-3 centimeters straight, approximately 2-3 millimeters underneath the fold we have. So look at it again and make sure you're really a little bit underneath your fold there. Otherwise it could pull on the right side after you turned it over. But now we leave the jacket exactly in that position and we go a little bit back towards that first seam that we got there, because with a little stitch we have to hold this up now. That means each and every seam here on the bottom on the hem I will stitch over by first folding it exactly into the fold that I got there, and then I'm taking just a little bit of the corners from every seam, but making sure not to stitch into any of the material towards the right side. You really got to be exactly only on that little bit of the, as you can see here, don't go over any farther. You got to stay on the seam part, but you got to do it on every seam that you have there on the bottom on your hem, because that will make sure that your lining will not fall down and sticking out on the coat when you're wearing it. And now I take my scissors, because on each side where I've just done those corners, that is just a little bit too much material inside there. That's why I slightly cut some out before I will go now to turn this jacket inside out. And to do this, I'm looking, where is my sleeve that I left open when I made the lining? I put my hand in it and I go all the way across towards the other sleeve. There I get a hold of my vent or on the hem from the sleeve and slowly pull it around to the proper side. Now make sure, take your time on this to make sure that you're not ripping the edges over from your lining sleeve. Slowly, bit by bit, you're turning the inside out or the outside in, however you like to say that. Now, the sleeve that you have with the hole, you leave on the left side, because later on we have to close that on the sewing machine, while the other sleeve you can already totally pull over to the right side. Now go to the corners on the seam on your hem, which you've just stitched. That was the last job we've done, and make sure you're pushing it right out into a nice corner. And here you can see that's the way, because of the curve we stitched, that your lining will not show out. It automatically slightly goes up inside the coat. Because now, when I've turned everything inside out, I of course will go to the ironing board and iron this lining exactly down like that, as you can see it lying here slightly above the bottom seam, and then no lining whatsoever will show on the right side while wearing it. So now there's only one thing left for the sewing, and that is to close this seam here, or this hole, but I'm not going to show you that, because I'm sure you can handle that just by folding centimeters over on each side and stitching it up.
So hello again, because here we're at the end of the video of all the parts and how exactly to make a jacket, from starting how to make the pattern all the way to the total finished project. So all I can say for now is I hope you have the guts to start this big project from my number 1 all the way to number 7, which is this video, to do a jacket for your own use with your kind of style that you want. Because as somebody said to me the other day, well, why should I make a jacket like that? It's so much work. Because I can buy one in any store for €20 or $20. Well, of course you can. But be honest. Have you ever seen a jacket like that? With that kind of material? No. This is something very, very special. Of course, you got to spend, let's say, between 40 and €80, depending on how much you pay for the material. But if you look around, I'm sure you can find something that suits your spending money as well. And then you will be the only one with that particular jacket. And that's what it's all about. So all I can say for now, I wish you so much fun and success with doing your own jacket. And I'm looking forward, as always, to your comments. And let me know where you're writing from, where at the end of the world you are, because I like to read this. Don't worry, I'm not going to come and visit you. No, I stay here. Okay, unless you live on a real nice warm beach the whole year round, that kind of weather, then I might come. Okay, goodbye for now, until next time. See you.